Okay, everybody, welcome back. Tonight we have Ted Rasmussen, who's a longtime member of the club, going to be demonstrating wine stoppers for us. So I'll let Ted, you want to give us a start?
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, hello everybody. It's good to be back. I've been away for a while, but I've been turning and always like to turn. I'm glad to see that there was a challenge to make miniatures because a lot of people these days are just here to make large platters and large bowls and big things, but there's still room to make some small things, and it gives me great relaxation and a lot of fun to make these wine stoppers, which I'm going to demonstrate one for you tonight. But I'll just show you a couple of these, and the shapes you can come up with are, you know, they're infinitesimal, I guess, but this is my first one, which goes back about maybe 5 or 6, 7 years ago. And it's made out of color wood, but you notice it has a cork. Okay. Corks you can still get, and they still work fine. A little more difficult. You have to put a 3/8 dowel in the middle of the cork here. But all the newer ones here have the more sanitary silicone sleeve, and they work very nicely. There's probably 3 or 5.
Ben's got to get him in focus.
There you go. There's probably maybe 4 or 5, I should say, different ways to make these things. And I kind of came up with a way to make them that I think is pretty unique that I've not found in any magazine yet. They seem to be going through a lot of steps that were kind of unnecessary. So Craft Supplies in Provo, Utah, which some of you I think you're familiar with, they sell these little dowels that are a 1/2 inch diameter, combination dowels, a 1/2 inch diameter, and with a 3/8 inch part that you put into your blank. So it ends up looking like this. This is a piece of Osage orange, and it has the 1/2 inch dowel sticking out, and the 3/8 dowel has been glued in. And the glue I like to use is Tight Bond or any equivalent like that. I don't use CA glue for this. So let it dry overnight so it's nice and strong. The 1/2 inch dowel becomes a support for this larger little blank here, which is about 3 inches long by about 1.5 inches in diameter. So you have to remember that you're being supported by a 1/2 inch dowel, which is going to be in my #1 jaws on the chuck. And that's why I use the tailstock to give it some support just about for the whole trip. At the very end, you can pull the tailstock back, which I'll show you later on. So just some of the woods I used real quickly. That's, someone else showed holly tonight. That's a piece of holly.
This is what you're looking at. That's what the camera's seeing when you show your pieces.
Okay. Thank you. This is a piece of marble wood. Looks like marble. And here's a finished piece of Osage orange. A little better. And someone was using the term robust tonight, and I like that term. I like the handle to be robust. Okay. You've kind of got to have to limit the height of these things somewhat because they won't fit in the refrigerator in a bottle of wine sometimes. So we eliminate them to about 2 1/4 inches most of the time.
I like that those all have crisp details. They're not all buttery.
Yeah, if you look in a lot of the catalogs and online even, and I've looked at a lot of them, it seems like the shapes are just very common and rounded over, sanded over without any distinct definition to them. And I like to do definition. I think I just like the classic style of that. And this one was sanded across the top just to give it a little offset. This is a piece of Peroba Rosa, which is from northeastern South America. Beautiful wood. The story on this stuff is a friend of mine, when I was demonstrating tools at Penny's for 10 years, he brought in a whole bunch of pieces of wood, I guess you could say. They're about 2.5 inches square by 45 inches long or so. He gave me 40 or 45 of them. But there are pallets that came into a company in Lidditz from South America made out of this stuff. But it's some of the most beautiful stuff you can get. There's a lot of nail holes in it, but you can work around that sometimes.
What's the other? Peroba Rosa?
Peroba Rosa.
Peroba.
Yeah. I've really tried to identify it because it's such a beautiful wood, and that's the closest I can come to it. I hope I'm correct with that. Peroba Rosa, but it has some nice darker shades of pink or red in it, and when you get the nicest pieces.
Ted, you made a comment that's worth thinking about, and that is that when they're cutting down all the rainforests, for good wood, there's a lot of scrap wood goes out, and just like here in America, they turn it into pallet wood.
Right.
And then they heat treat it because it has to be heat treated. So they send the pallets of all the stuff from South America, maybe some very fine pieces for turning because it's not ideal for furniture.
Right.
Or flooring.
Yeah.
You know,
Very
it's
true.
an excellent source if you can find it. Well
Okay.
done.
Let's see. Here's a piece from Africa. This is Bubinga. Very nice turning wood. Hard and keeps the shape very well. This is the last one I did, and this is probably the shape I'm going to do tonight when we demonstrate. And I just like a classic shape like that. There's a couple of matching beads on it. The top may be a little different when I do it, but I try to just, when you first start out, what's your name again?
Sheila.
Sheila. When you first start out like Sheila, you probably make some drawings or sketches, you know, and it's still a good idea to do that and make some measurements. But after you get into it a while, you're able to just kind of come up and design as you go for something like this, which is rather small. Okay, but this is a piece of color wood again, 16th inch birch that's been laminated with some color in it. Comes in 8 or 10 different forms, but it's a nice, it's just a nice blue-gray color, and I thought that would be very nice, make a nice wine stopper, and it looks like it did. Okay, so that's a couple things. I'll go back around the lathe now and go ahead and get started, if that's okay. Now, when you come and demonstrate, it's just like going into church, like I do sometimes and play piano. Each piano is a little bit different, and each lathe is a little bit different. When you buy a lathe, if you make your arm into a 90, every book says you should have the tool rest or the center axis here about as high as that elbow, okay? So this is just a little high for me, but that's okay. My Powermatic I have back at the shop is a lot larger, and I stand on like a 4-inch box to get me to comply with that rule. So it works very well. So, okay, here we go. We have a chuck here, which is a one-way, happens to be a one-way chuck, but there are many different kinds of chucks, and they all come with different size jaws. This is number 1 jaws, which can close to about 3/8 of an inch. So therefore, that's going to be okay to hold that 1/2 inch dowel. So this is a piece of that Peroberosa. Very nice turning wood. We'll try that tonight and see how it works out. I'm going to mount that in here, and what I do is just push it nice and tight against the jaws, and then we'll tighten it down a little bit. I had to borrow my friend's chuck with his jaws on it because my machine is 1 1/4 inch 8 threads per inch, and his chuck fits on a 1 inch 8 threads per inch setup. So we'll see if that works out tonight.
Is there a reason you buy the dowels instead of just making them?
Well, yeah, you can. I'm going to show you that. I have some samples. You bet. Okay, and like I said before, it's good to support it with a tailstock because you're only supporting this blank with a 1/2 inch dowel. So we'll run that in a little bit. And normally I'd use like a 6-inch tool rest. This is about a 12-inch tool rest. And I brought my own, but it was the base of it was too long to fit in here. So we'll get by tonight with this.
Ted, do you drill your 1/2 inch hole or your hole in the stock?
Yeah, with a 3/8 inch bit on a drill press.
Or on the lathe?
No, on the, you can do it on the lathe, but I do it on the in a drill press. Make a whole bunch of them at once. Yeah. Okay. I usually like to have the tool rest a little below center, so you're kind of working on center then with your tools. So this looks like it should be okay. Maybe a little bit lower.
Now, if you guys are going to ask questions, he has a live mic on his collar, and this is a live mic. So you can pass it around to ask questions. Well, I'm just going to give it to Matt.
Okay, we're going to just round that over first. Make sure everything clears. Safety first. Okay. Just going to use a roughing gouge. This is a 1-inch roughing gouge that I've had for probably 45 of the 50 years I've been turning. and I have it rounded over a little bit instead of being straight across. And that way I just kind of prefer that. So we'll just round this off a little bit here. A little more speed. Like I say, you start with an 1.5 inch blank, about 3 inches long, and let's see if that's totally rounded here. And your finished size will probably end up to be about 1 3/8 inch diameter by 2 1/4 long. I'll measure up 2 1/4 in a little bit. I'm just going to have a little bit yet to round it off to make sure it's in a cylinder form. Okay. Is that mic still working okay for the Zoom people?
Yep.
Okay. So let's get a little scale here. So from the base where it hits the jaws, I'm just going to measure up about 2 1/4, make a mark. And it can be a little shorter, or a little longer. It's just that you don't want to get up above 3 inches because it just might be too high for the refrigerator with that stopper in the top of the bottle. Okay, I've made my mark. Then we'll just roll this around. I'll be handing out, I made up some nice handouts for everybody. They're 6 pages long. And I put a lot of effort into it with some nice drawings. So feel free to try some of these at home. It might be good to even suggest it as maybe a challenge down the line. Everybody make a wine stopper 1 month. All right, Matt?
Sounds good.
Okay. Now, I have to remember that my tools are in a different place tonight too. Usually they're up here in front of me. All right, here we go. Just going to run a parting tool in, aiming a little bit of an angle towards the tailstock, and that'll become like the top of the piece eventually. I'll take that down to about 3/8 of an inch. You can remove excess stock a number of different ways. A nice way to do it is to use a peeling cut with a skew, which you can do. Get rid of a lot of stock quickly. Being careful not to run into your log set. When I get down to some beads, I really like a parting tool because you can use it as a skew. You have to think of it in a sense as a small miniature skew. And if you've ever gotten a catch with a skew, you can get a catch with a little parting tool as well when you're doing that. So, okay. So just take it down a little longer, a little more. So for the time being, it's a good idea to leave the little nub here that you have, and that'll let the tailstock in there for a while. At the very end, you can remove that once you've got most of the stock removed. But for now, you need the support from the tailstock and the chuck end to hold this guy in place. So we're just going to do some shaping now of the top. I'm just using a spindle gouge. the shape, what's going to become the top. Be a little thick.
Is there an advantage to putting on a tenon or putting in a dowel?
What was the question?
I was wondering if you can put a tenon on the other end instead of putting a dowel in, or is a dowel that much better?
Well, you could do it that way. I'm just saving a lot of work by using that little dowel that I bought from Craft Supplies. I think it works very well and it's strong enough. But yeah, you could do a tenon. So I have the top of the part that's going to be the top or the crown. We'll run that in a little bit more, just using a spindle gouge.
Ted, that dowel's in there
Maybe
because your
slight
silicone
curve.
plug's gonna fit around it, right?
You can get rid of some wood while you're doing this. When you cut with a spindle gouge, you can actually put it up on the edge sometimes to start your curve. If you're doing an inside curve like a cove, you can put it up on the edge. And then as you're working, you end up with it being level. You can remove some of the stock. I'm going to go back to the parting tool now, just to get rid of some of the stuff. Okay. Go back to the spindle gouge. And get rid of some of the stock that you don't need. It's good to keep your eye on the spindle because that's metal. You want to stay away from that. That's okay. Move in a little closer here if I can. Yes, it's hard to get close with this large tool rest, but we'll make do. Make sure everything's cleared. Okay. We'll start doing some beads now. Using the tip of the parting tool like a skew. Just kind of rolling it over. When you're doing spindle turning like Sheila showed us earlier, and even on something like this, you can always, while you're working the tool on the piece, you can watch above to watch the shape change. That's always the way I do it. And it's one way to keep track of things. I'll try to run 2 beads here. Trying to make them just about the same size. You can actually cut with the parting tool like you can with a skew. And, do some fine work with it. Just going to stop and take a quick look here, see how we're doing. Okay, so far so good.
Hey, Ted,
Yes.
what would you compare that wood to domestic wood as far as hardness? It looks like it's a hard, dry wood.
It's hard, but it's not that hard. It really turns nicely, and it's very forgiving if you make a mistake. It's not really that hard. I'd say maybe cherry.
Okay.
I like cherry, I would say. This seems to be a pretty nice piece because it has some darker reds in it, or dark pink, whatever you want to call it. But when we do the finishing, we're using an Australian triple E wax. And on top of that, a lot of people that make these put something called shella wax on top of that. But triple E is a great finish in itself for small things like this, because I'll sand this down to 400. And then once you put your triple E on, you work it with a rag just like you're sanding. And you're supposed to go very slowly. Now on my Paramatic, I can get it to crawl, but on this thing, I think I'm just going to have to do it by hand to start putting the wax on. But at the end, once you've used the triple E, they say that gives a finish that appears like it's now 2000 grit, which is very nice. So it does provide a very excellent surface for any friction polish you might put on after that, like shella wax. I called them the other day and ordered some new triple E because the wax I'm using tonight is just about through. It's still okay though, but they don't sell the shella wax anymore, which is a great top coating for the triple E. So I'm just going to hope that I can find it somewhere else. It's a great finish. Anybody use shella wax before? It's an Australian product, as the triple E is. I think you've heard of triple E though. I think we mentioned it somewhere along the line, maybe at a few meetings ago.
I've used shallow wax. I find it goes hard in the jar. I lose it. I buy a jar and I never get to use it. It just all.
Okay, well, the shella wax I had lasted for 3 years, so maybe I lucked out. Anyway.
My hard shell of wax, I put a mineral oil in with it and mixed it and heated it up, and it came back pretty well.
Okay. Thanks for that. I've heard of that before. Thank you. Okay, let me just further define this a little bit. Make sure everything is safe. And let's see. Get rid of some of the excess here. Now in the instructional sheets that I'm going to hand everyone here, you can take one home. I've made 20 copies. I ran out of paper, but it's about 120 copies I ran to get 6 apiece in there. Anyway, on that, an important instruction when you're doing these things is you're going to have to do the bottom. So you have to move this whole affair away from the chuck jaws just a little bit. So the way you do that is to loosen this carefully. You don't want to rotate this any at all if you can help it. Loosen your tailstock, and while you're pushing that way towards the tailstock, wind this back till you get a space of about 1/8 inch or 3/16. Then you can work on the bottom, and with no interference from the metal or the steel, you don't want to hit that. Okay, so I'll keep going here for a little bit, and then we'll show you how that works. This is actually a bowl gouge. It's a small one, but it's a Henry Taylor tool, and Henry Taylor tools are one of my favorites over the years. So we'll use that to remove some of the excess here, and do some shaping here. Back to the parting tool. Okay, I think we will move that back at this point. So we're going to loosen this in the chuck. Come on. There we go. And we're just going to wind this out towards the tailstock a little bit.
Hold on a second. I'll try to fix it.
Okay, that should do it. And once you have that out and holding it fairly still, you can lock this again. And then you can bring the tailstock up a little bit again and lock that. Okay, let's see how it's spinning here. And it looks almost true, so I think we're in good shape. Now, before I go any further, what I like to do, if you've noticed on, I don't know if you took notice on all of this, I like to use a wire. This piece of wood that I have this Christmas wire on is as old as, or as long as I've been turning. I've had it for like 50 years. Just a scrap piece of wood. But this wire is very strong. And you can, I'd always like to delineate with wire. It's not that the turning is bad. The turning is pretty precise, but I like to emphasize some contrast here with the wire burn. So we can speed the lathe up a little for that, get more friction. Just a matter of holding it. Get some nice smoke off there. Okay, it's hot too. Now we can work near the steel part of the jaws and get some of this out of there. The silicon sleeves are about 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch, so that's what you want to make the bottom, the final angle on the bottom, so that the silicon looks good on that. Just like about a 45-degree cut. That should be fine. Then I like to take the little bowl gouge, and this is going to be like a little OG. I think Alan mentioned, someone mentioned that tonight, an OG curve. Again, trying to catch the top of what's going to be the bottom, so you get some nice definition. I put either a spindle gouge or a bowl gouge on its edge like this to get it going, and then you can flatten it out here. And you need to remember that you have a 3/8 inch dowel inside. You don't want to get any thinner than that, so you break into it. Try to get a precise curve in there. Okay. Use that little parting tool again, like a skew. Get that a little bit lower. See if that profile looks okay. Okay, that's not bad. Okay, we can. I think I want to just hit the one wire burn just one more time. Hold it like that. Sometimes when you turn it, you'll notice that the very bottom, the flat part that's going into the 1/2-inch dowel, it's just a little bit of a ridge there. So you can sneak in there. If this parting tool is too big, I have a smaller one I brought along, but it looks like it's going to be okay. The space again is about 1/8 to almost 3/16. So I think we can do that without touching the steel. I'm just getting rid of the little, it's kind of like flashing sticking out a little bit. Okay. Okay, it looks fine. Okay, I guess we should get that a little bit closer up top here. We can pare this down a little bit now. And the tool to actually do that crown, the very top of the crown is the parting tool. It makes a nice cut. You have to go slowly. Still keeping the support of the tailstock. And eventually you can get a skew in there to tear this thing off. Okay. This has been around with me too, also from almost 50 years. Everybody here, Buck Brothers Tools? Buck Brothers. So, long. On a skew, you have the heel and the toe. So I'm using the toe end now to try to get right in there tight to nip off what's left of the top. Okay. As you see, it's stuck on there. There we go. At this point, I'll just go along with the skew. Carefully finish that on top. The edge makes a fine, almost like a fine shearing tool as you go along the profile. And any sanding will take care of that. Let's see what we have. Okay. All right, I'm pretty pleased with that. And we'll do some sanding now. In the sheets I'm going to give you to take along, if you do some fairly good cutting, you can probably start with 220 and maybe go up 280, 320 and end up with 400. If it's a little rough, you can drop back to 180, 280, so forth, 180, 150, and it shouldn't be any rougher than that, okay? We had one guy down there when I was teaching at the Campbell Folk School in North Carolina. We had a guy who, he relied mostly on his sandpaper to do his turnings, and I mean, they were really pretty rough. He needed a few more lessons, but the instructor came out and gave him a piece of grit that he'd made up. He got 4 pebbles from outside and glued it onto a piece of duct tape and said, "Here you go, Elmer, here's 4 grit." And that got a lot of laughs, so it was neat. Anyway, he became a pretty good turner after all. Okay, so in that position where we used to do the bottom and then finally do the little nub here, that's, you're ready to sand. You can just leave the dowel just like that. And also when you put the finish on, then you're away from the metal as well. So you just kind of leave it in that position. So I know sanding is boring. I'll try to make it quick because I do want to show you the finishing process. Okay. I always sand at slower speeds. For me, it makes, it does a good job. Let's see. There we go. A little slow. So I'm starting with 220. The important part about sanding is to keep the paper moving all the time. When you're doing a larger piece, one of the nicest features on a big lathe is that you can reverse it. Because as you know, when you're sanding, you're laying the fibers over one way. Then when you reverse it, you can sand those fibers the other way, which makes it much smoother. Okay? So bear with me for about 5 minutes on the sanding, and then we can move on. You can roll your sandpaper over just like a tube there to get in the coves. Basically, you have beads and coves and a little OG, a little change of shape at the bottom. Sometimes sanding will remove a little bit of the wire burn you put on, so you can always touch that up at the end if you wish. Okay, looking pretty good. With each grit, I have a habit of going with the grain at the end, but it makes a big difference when you go to put the wax on. You don't see that many lines that way. Remember, you have grain parallel to the axis here, and it's nice to end up just like you would finishing a tabletop, finishing with the grain, for an analogy. Okay, let's go to 320. So on this, I'm basically just using 220, then 320, and 400. And then the triple E will act like the final piece of grit, if you will. And that'll take it up to maybe 1,000 or 2,000, or appear like 2,000 grit, which is pretty fine. On the top, I try to determine which way the grain is and kind of end with the grain as well. Just makes a difference. And it'll make it appear just a little more plush, a little more polished, I should say. Okay. Stop it.
Ted, you said you were going at a slower speed for sanding. How much slower? What's the RPM on sanding that you're using?
Well, in the Powermatic, I mean, at probably 300, something like that. This, I'm not quite sure what we're doing here, but it's a little faster than I'm used to, but it's okay. I just find you don't get any hot spots then with sanding. You know, sometimes if you're going too fast, you get just a little too much friction from pressing too hard, and makes it a little rough. Okay. So we'll finish up with some 400, then you can show you the finishing process after that. Take a quick look here. Finish up with the grain a little bit, and it should be about ready. Paper towels we have in the shop are a little softer than these guys, Ben. I got these downstairs, but they're good ones. So I always end up with use a paper towel or a little rag or cloth, clean it off a little bit. You can add a lot of shine just with a paper towel because you're pressing wood against wood essentially. And you can see it shine a little bit now just by doing that. Okay, that's.
You ever use the sawdust to do the shine?
Yeah, yeah, it's an old trick. Yeah, you can just get a handful of sawdust and carefully push it on. It'll varnish it, right? Does a good job. Okay. Now we'll put some of this triple E. Comes in a jar like this. This is probably 3 years old. It's hanging in there, but it's almost dry. But still working fairly well. So I'm just going to put this on by hand. Okay. Get some color out. As I say with the Powermatic, I can run it so it's just going about like so. You know, not much faster than that.
Triple E wax, it's triple E wax.
Triple E.
So it's not the brown, really stuff you're thinking of. Used to talk about. It's E.
Yeah, 3 E's are on it. Triple E wax. Friction wax, it is. Okay. So we'll just do a little more handwork tonight. It's no problem. And I notice after the wax, you will have to take the wire one more time if you use burning technique to clean that out of the grooves. So let's see if I can make sure that's on there. Okay, let's see what we can get in low speed here. And so you just put this on so you see the beginning of a shine. And when it's going slower, you have a little more room to determine that. And as with anything around a lathe, you be very careful with a rag. Very easy to have an accident, get it caught. Pay good attention to what you're doing. And hopefully you'll be okay. Okay, I'm just gonna let that dry now for, let me take a look at it to make sure I think it's on there okay. Yeah, should be okay. Let's let that dry a little. I usually bring I have an incandescent lamp I use, an old, and I usually bring that right down so it's right next to it. The heat from the lamp and the spinning through the air is fast, good RPM will make it dry quicker. So I usually let that go for 5 minutes. We'll go about 2 or 3 here if you don't mind. While it's drying, let me hand these out. Here you go, Matt. You want to do it? Sure. Yeah, okay. Well, that's okay. Yeah, I see that. You could use your wife's hair dryer, right? Oh, Doug, take those samples. Just hand them. That's right with your left hand. Those samples there. Just hand them around so they can see. Okay. Yeah, okay. Doug will pass out some samples for you to look at of the sleeves and the dowels. Okay, then we'll see what we get in the way of a shine here. I hope it's okay. Old flannel pajamas make great soft rags to work with. Coming up fairly nicely, not as good as, it's not quite as dry as when I do it in my shop, but it's going to be okay. Okay, now take the wire to get the wax off where we burned it. You can see it just comes right up onto the wire like that. Got very nice. Okay. Now I just want to get a sleeve here. Show you how to put that on. Okay, we'll take this out. Like I say, these silicone sleeves, they go on the 1/2-inch dowel with a friction fit. You could turn your own dowels, we'd have to be very accurate, okay? Using a vernier caliper and so forth, make sure it's exactly right because it's smack on a 1/2 inch. they sell chucks that, and the claim is that it won't make any marks on your dowel. What does that matter? I don't have one of those chucks and it goes right on anyway. So I usually try to hold this with a piece of rag while I do it. And we'll just put that on there. I just try to go all the way around and make sure it's flush. So, okay, there you have it, finished product. Thanks very much for your attention. Okay. Pass it around.
Anybody out there got any questions? Vasco?
Yeah, did you put any kind of glue on the dowel? I'm sorry, I missed that. You just slipped the silicone on.
Oh, no, that's just a friction fit. And believe me, once it's on, it's on. It takes a good effort to get it back off. No glue at all. It's just the silicone to the birch dowel or maple. But I think they're making a maple that I bought. So yeah, it fits on nicely and it's a tight fit and it won't come off.
Okay, thank
It'll
you.
come in, it'll come in and out of a bottle top fine. Won't come off.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions?
Why are you using the parting tool? I've never seen it used in that way. I thought that would be a skew job.
Well, I'm using the parting tool to get in a tight place and using it as a skew. I use the skew on other products. I love the skew. I love the way it cuts, but it's also harder to use when you get in tight like that. So that's why. Make sense?
So you're saying that the parting tool is just a very, very narrow skew?
Yeah, that's the way I figure it.
Why don't you turn them the opposite way and drill the hole instead of having to actually even fear getting in touch with the chuck? You could just turn.
Yeah, that I know you. I've done it. I did it that way before. You're exactly right.
Why you don't do that?
Yeah, it's like an extra step, but to me, it's just easier this way. And as long as you're careful, it's okay. I've never had an accident yet. Okay, that's why. Any other questions?
Ted, have you done any of the stainless steel Ruth Niles?
No, I know they have that, but I have some of that at home. I just haven't made one like that yet.
I gotta tell you, I typically use that, the stainless steel. I started with chrome and red line, they
Yeah.
hit it very quickly,
Oh,
but it takes a long time
yeah.
to work with, I'll do insets for the 1/4-20 and et cetera, to make it to fit. This is
Yeah.
a lot quicker. I like
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Come on around this way.
Okay, sure.
Your angled top, are you doing that multi-axis? Is that how you're getting the?
This one.
Yeah.
No. It's all symmetrical when you're done turning. You just sand it on this grant.
Oh, you just.
Yeah, just sanding it over. Yeah.
Because it looked like it had an actual curve to the top too, but just on one dimension.
Right. So that's it. And I try to pay attention to where the grain is too and go with the grain instead of across. That's my wife's favorite one. She likes that shape. So I made a couple more like that, and I'm selling these for maybe too cheap. I don't know, $18.
Wow, good for you.
So I don't know. They 5 of them, about 5 a month, sell down at the Pennsylvania Craft, and I make other things too. But right now it's wine stoppers. They're a good stocking stuffer. Christmas is coming.
They also fit in olive oil bottles.
What's that?
They also work great in olive oil bottles too.
Okay. Yeah.
CBD, CBD, or
Olive oil. Maybe your CBD, your CDB or something.
everybody's selling it.
Is that illegal here in this state yet?
Any other questions from anybody in Zoom land or in the house?
Ted, that was great. Appreciate it.
Thank you very
That
much.
was really
Thanks
good.
for having me.
Thank you, Ted.
The hour is late. Thanks, Matt.
Hey, Ted, give me your microphone.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Come around this way.
Let me go around this. Good.
So thank you everyone for attending. Next month's challenge is turning a child's toy and adding color. And I'll be sending out an email inviting anyone that wants to join the challenge committee to decide the challenges for next year. And we encourage, since next month's meeting will be the last meeting of the year, we encourage everybody out in Zoom land. If you want to stop by and see our space, our hybrid space here, we'd love to have you. And unless there's any other announcements, we'll adjourn for the evening, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Night.
I think you did. Very interesting. Yeah, I left my tag at home, so. I remember you.
Familiar with Laferty? Familiar with Laferty?
Yeah.
Oh.
One of those things
Okay, sure.
So,
Yeah, yeah, no worries.
I'm going to end the Zoom for all, for anybody who's still out there.